I have the Bentley manual. It's the workshop manual for the 1961 to 65 VW Beetle. And if you look right near the beginning, it has a section on engine removal. These are the steps that it lists in order to take the engine out, and they're here, and then it continues over here and talks about exactly what you need to do to get it out. They show having a gantry like this to lift the car. That'd be really nice. I don't have that, so I'm gonna have to make do. But I'm gonna follow these instructions. The one thing I'm gonna add is I'm gonna drain the oil first, so I don't have to do that later, and then follow all of these instructions here. And this is the engine I'm gonna remove out of there. So first I'll jack up the car a little bit, drain the oil, and then start following the procedures in the manual. While that's draining, I'm going to go to the first step of engine removal, which is to remove the ground post from the battery. And so you can see it's in the back, underneath the back seat. I've got to take that terminal off right there. I need to remove the clamp from the negative terminal. For me, it's just a 1/2 inch wrench on this right here to loosen it up. And once it's loose enough, this should wiggle and lift right off. I'm going to tuck it down there so that it doesn't make contact. The next step is to disconnect the fuel line. I've removed the heater bellows so you can see a little bit better. But you can see the fuel line is right there. I have a hard line that comes from the fuel pump, so what I'm going to do is put a clamp on the fuel line to cut off the fuel flow. Okay, you can see I used pliers to squeeze the clamp that's on that hose and slid it up out of the way, and then I clamped with a pair of surgical clamps on the hose. Now I can just slide the fuel hose off of the hard line. This is what it looks like when the fuel line is slid off. You can see the fuel line is dripping just a little bit of fuel, but it shouldn't be too bad. Okay, I have this hose off of here by loosening that clamp, and then I have this clamp slid up to where this will just slide right off of here. Then you can remove the air cleaner. Like I say, just keep it level and put it somewhere level. To remove the rear cover plate, you can see that there's a little plate here with 3 screws you can take out, and then you've got screws around the periphery. You've got them where this heater preheat tube goes through, and you can take all these screws out. To make it easier, I'm going to take off these tubes here on each side just to give myself room to work. Got the air tubes off so you can see a lot better the screws that need to come out of there on each side. I took out the little pulley cover plate there, the smaller one, and I've got all the screws out, including, you can see there's some that are kind of hidden underneath out here on the side, on each side. They're hidden underneath the seal. Got all those out. Now I'm going to try to lift this plate out. I had to pry it up a little bit along the front, but you can see it just lifts right up and out of here and comes right out like that. And this is the piece. Once that's out, you can see that it leaves room for the engine when you've got it unbolted to be able to slide rearward, because you've got to clear the main shaft that goes into the transmission. Next, I need to unhook all of the electrical connections. You can see I've got one here, and then this one goes over to the choke. There's one right here. You can see I pull that off the choke, feed those wires out, and then there's one that comes down to the pressure center switch right here that needs to come off. Okay, I've got that one off, and then the last one comes over here, and you can see that it connects to the voltage regulator right here. You take that off. So you can tell when you have them all, because this main wiring harness, you can slide it out and get all, oh, I actually have one other one. I've got to take this bigger one off of here too. You basically want to take all the wires that come from this harness off of the engine. I've got that disconnected, and so now I should be able to slide the wires out from behind here, and you can see all of the wires are disconnected. It's really important that you disconnect the battery, because some of these wires can be hot and start to arc and everything. So I've got all that done. The next step is going to be to take the accelerator cable off. So I just need to loosen this bolt right here and let this cable come out of there. So I just loosen this up, get it loose, and you see this thing comes out. You've got this piece and this spring. And once those are out, once you get these pieces out, as you withdraw the engine, that cable can slide back through there. Everything is disconnected up here. So now I have to get underneath of the car and disconnect the heater control cables. This is the heater control cable. You can see where it comes out of these arms that are basically the main mounting struts for the engine and transmission. And they come over to this little bolt here that you have to loosen and slide the end of that cable out of there on each side. I've loosened the nut, and when you grab this wire, it just slides out of there like that. You can see the nut comes out too. So that is disconnected. This is right near the front of the heater boxes. So if you come out here, you can see this is the heater box, and then the thing is just sort of right under here. This is what the little cable holder looks like. So you see, you really need two 10mm wrenches, one to hold each end of it, to be able to loosen it. Once you slide the cable out, then this can just slide out of that bracket. With the heater cables disconnected, all that's left is to undo the 4 mounting bolts. I'll start with the 2 underneath the motor, get those out. Okay, these are the 2 bolts underneath. You can see to get to them, you're on the front side of this cross member that the transmission rests on, and you reach in here. It's a 17mm. I've already loosened this one, and so you can see now it's just finger tight. And what you're going to do is just thread this off, and there's just going to be a stud there like that. You do that on each side underneath the car. The last 2 bolts are on the top of this mounting flange. If you look back there, you'll see, if it focuses, you see that bolt right there. There's one on each side. Those have to come off, but to get them off, you have to support the engine, and they're through bolts, so you have to hold the other side, because once you start turning, this bolt on the other side will turn. So it either takes a friend or a pair of vice grips or something to hold it on the other side. I've got a little jack supporting the engine. Now I'm going to attempt to get these 2 bolts off that are back behind the fan shroud. I've got all 4 bolts out, and I've got the engine supported with this trolley jack. So I'm going to grab onto these tailpipes and then just wiggle and see if I can pull the engine back toward me and work it out of there. Okay, I've got it pulled back and tipped toward me. If you look down in here, what you can see is, it looks like those bolts down there haven't quite cleared. There's 2 bolts at the bottom. We need to clear those holes. And I'll have to keep an eye on this fuel line, make sure it doesn't get caught or bent somewhere. But if you look from this side, you'll see it looks like we're clear of this transmission spline. It's just getting those bolts at the bottom, making sure that those, you can see that bolt at the bottom comes out of those holes. I'll try wiggling it a little more. Okay, you can see the bolts are clear in the bottom, but I'm not completely clear of that spline. You can see it's still hung up a little. I'm going to try tipping it down in the back and see if I can get it clear of that. And I'll watch this fuel line too. Okay, now it looks like I got it completely clear of everything. The bolts, the shaft, and I think everything is clear. I'm going to try to set the engine completely on the ground and then lift the car up high enough that I can slide it out. I've got the engine lowered down onto blocks, and it's pretty much clear of everything. You can see down in there. It looks like it's pretty clear. So I've got a jack under here, under the main cross member. I'm going to jack the car up high enough that I can slide the engine out and clear the body of the car. I have the tires blocked on both sides. I've got it just high enough now to slide the engine out from under the car. As you can see, you've got to jack it pretty high to get it up high enough to clear the engine. And that is how you get your motor out of your Volkswagen.